One soldier to another. Am I dead?
Everything's gonna be okay.
It's the new me.
Captain Coulter Stevens wakes up on a train bound for Chicago, disoriented and confused. He doesn't know how he ended up on the train. Across from him sits a woman who addresses him as Sean and seems puzzled by his odd behavior. Stevens, believing he's still a U.S. Army helicopter pilot on a mission in Afghanistan, tries to convince her that he's not who she thinks he is. The woman just laughs, assuming her friend Sean is joking. The situation becomes even more bizarre when Stevens looks at his reflection in the window and sees not his own face, but that of another man. Panicking, he rushes to the bathroom and stares into the mirror, only to see the same stranger's face staring back at him. Searching his pockets, he finds a wallet with a driver's license belonging to a man named Sean Fentress, the man in the mirror. The woman tries to calm him down, assuring him that everything will be fine. Suddenly, the train explodes. Coulter Stevens wakes up again, this time strapped into a dark, multifaceted capsule. His mind is flooded with strange, unfamiliar memories. A woman's voice echoes from above, and Stevens is disoriented, struggling to remember where he is. The last thing he recalls is a mission in Afghanistan. As he scans the capsule, he locates a monitor displaying a video feed from a military headquarters. The woman on the screen, who he recognizes as Goodwin, starts guiding him through a series of associations to reorient him. Stevens asks to speak with his father, but Goodwin refuses, instead urging him to focus on the explosion on the train. She instructs him to return to the train and find the bomb. Though Stevens initially believes he's trapped in some kind of simulation, Goodwin insists, sending him back to the same seat on the train as Sean Fentress. Amazed by how realistic the environment seems, Stevens realizes he only has 8 minutes to find the bomb. He begins by observing the other passengers, noting every detail and trying to recall where the explosion had occurred previously. Eventually, he deduces that the bomb is hidden in the train's bathroom. Rushing there, he searches the small space and discovers the explosive device concealed in the ventilation system. The bomb can be triggered with any electronic device like a cell phone, tablet, or laptop. Desperate for guidance, Stevens calls out to Goodwin, but she doesn't respond. With no other option, Stevens makes a critical decision. He decides to take charge and introduces himself to the train's security personnel, requesting that all passengers turn off their electronic devices to prevent the bomb from being triggered. His actions cause panic among the passengers. In the chaos, Coulter is forced to strike one of them, but his efforts are in vain as another explosion occurs, sending him back into the capsule. Once again, he sees Goodwin's face on the screen. Frustrated, Stevens demands to speak with the person in charge of the mission, but Goodwin refuses. She informs him that he has been with them for 2 months and asks him to report where the bomb was located and whether he identified the terrorist. Goodwin also stresses that the lives of many people depend on his actions. When Stevens pleads for more information about his situation, Goodwin consults with Dr. Rutledge, the mission director, before explaining. She reveals that a bomb exploded on a train approaching Chicago that very morning, killing all the passengers. The train Stevens keeps returning to is the same one that was destroyed, and the body he occupies belongs to Sean Fentress, who died in the blast. If Stevens fails to identify the bomber, more attacks will follow. Determined, Stevens recalls that the bomb was hidden in the bathroom. Goodwin instructs him to return to the train, observe all the passengers carefully, and identify anyone acting suspiciously, as one of them could be a terrorist. Without giving Stevens a chance to argue, she sends him back onto the train. Upon waking up in the train again, Stevens tries to figure out who among the passengers is dangerous. He even asks the woman who calls him Sean for help, but to no avail. During this, he learns that her name is Christina, and they are both teachers. His attention is then drawn to a nervous and frightened man who disembarks at the next station. Desperate to save Christina from the imminent explosion, Stevens suddenly kisses her and urges her to follow him. They hurry off the train, leaving Christina at the station while Stevens follows the suspicious man, hoping to prevent the terrorist attack. However, he soon realizes that he has made a mistake and targeted the wrong person. The train explodes in the distance. Stevens engages in a fight with the man, but during the struggle, He falls onto the tracks and is hit by an oncoming train, which sends him back to the capsule. Inside the capsule, an eerie cold fills the air. Captain Stevens pleads with Goodwin for help, but she remains silent. Meanwhile, Dr. Rutledge and Goodwin work together to fix the malfunction. Realizing he's on the brink of freezing, Stevens takes matters into his own hands. He manages to reconnect a few wires, and the life support system begins to function again. The temperature inside the capsule rises, and Stevens also restores the monitor. However, instead of Goodwin, Dr. Rutledge appears on the screen. Stevens explains that he attempted to save the girl and wishes to do the same for the other passengers. Rutledge, however, dismisses this as a futile effort. He explains the principles behind their technology, the source code. Stevens isn't being sent back to the past, but rather to a version of reality preserved in Sean Fentress's brain. The only goal is for Stevens to use the information in Fentress's memory to identify the terrorist. Rutledge emphasizes that all those people are already dead. They perished in the explosion earlier that morning. Understanding the gravity of his mission, Stevens is sent back with new instructions. He attempts to steal a gun from one of the conductors, planning to interrogate the passengers. However, the conductors catch and subdue him with a stun gun. When Stevens regains consciousness, it's too late. He's handcuffed to a rail, with Christina beside him. After a brief conversation, the train explodes again. Back in the capsule, Stevens once more requests to call his father, but Goodwin hesitates, unsure if it's a good idea. When Stevens insists, she promises to try and connect him with his father if he completes the mission. Stevens is sent back to the train, where he asks Christina to look up information about Captain Coulter Stevens on the internet and find out what happened to him. Meanwhile, Stevens resumes searching for the suspicious passengers, but the new strategy yields no results, only scaring them. Stevens then borrows a woman's phone to make a call, attempting to find out the location of the facility where his capsule is kept. During the call, Christina informs him that Coulter Stevens died in Afghanistan 2 months ago. Suddenly, the image of reality begins to shake, and other images and memories start to surface, where Stevens sees military personnel and his fellow soldiers. Due to the glitch, Stevens is returned to his capsule. He confronts Goodwin, saying that he learned of his own death and asks her to confirm it. Goodwin reveals that it's true, that Stevens did die, but a part of his brain remains active. The capsule with monitors is merely an illusion, a mental construct created by his brain so he can have a place to interact with Goodwin. Realizing this, Stevens panics as the capsule seems to grow and expand. Dr. Rutledge explains that everything Stevens is doing is happening in an alternate reality, but it benefits even the reality where the explosion has already occurred, and where Rutledge himself resides. Rutledge informs Stevens that he will have to die repeatedly in that train until he finds the terrorist. In exchange, Rutledge promises that once the mission is completed, Stevens will be allowed to die for real. Rutledge decides to take a more hands-on approach, believing that they've been too lenient with Stevens. He repeatedly sends Stevens into Sean's body, but the captain still fails to identify the terrorist. To motivate him, Rutledge plays a recording of a conversation Stevens had with his father, where his father speaks about his deceased son. This tactic works, pushing Stevens to focus even harder on his mission. Upon regaining consciousness on the train, Stevens quickly locates the bomb and successfully disables the detonator, which turns out to be a cell phone. He makes a call from the detonator's phone and a man answers. Stevens exits the bathroom to find the person behind the attack and sees a passenger talking on his phone. Assuming this is the terrorist, he confronts the man at gunpoint, only to realize he was just talking to his wife. Undeterred, Stevens calls again and notices a young man on the platform answering his phone. Stevens follows him, trying to exit the train before it departs, but misses his chance and leaps from the moving train. Christina notices and urges the conductor to stop the train. Meanwhile, Stevens tracks the unknown man, finds his wallet, and learns his name is Derek Frost. Derek gets into a white van, but Stevens prevents him from driving away by revealing that he knows who Derek is. Frost responds by showing Stevens a new, larger bomb in the van. At that moment, Christina arrives after leaving the train. Stevens is momentarily distracted, giving Frost the chance to shoot him, kill Christina, and escape to commit another attack. The train explodes once again. Back in the capsule, Stevens reports Derek Frost's identity and van details to Goodwin and Dr. Rutledge, saying he has completed his mission. He requests to be sent back into the train one final time before being disconnected from life support, as he wants to save all the passengers. Rutledge refuses, but they manage to track down the van, apprehend Frost, and defuse the bomb. The project members celebrate, but Goodwin remains at her workstation. Stevens persuades her to send him back to the train, and after 8 minutes, she agrees to disconnect him from life support. Back on the train, Stevens once again finds the bomb and disables both detonators. He then apprehends Derek Frost, handcuffing him to a rail, and informs him that his terrorist plans have failed. Stevens calls the police using Derek's phone to report the explosive devices and the fact that the perpetrator is on the train. With the terrorist neutralized, Stevens sends an email from Derek's phone to Goodwin's address, and then calls his father, pretending to be one of Captain Stevens's comrades. After a brief conversation, Stevens decides to spend his final moments meaningfully. He convinces a comedian on the train to make the entire carriage laugh, and then he kisses Christina, bracing for death. But nothing happens. Stevens remains alive in Sean's body. Meanwhile, at the military base, Goodwin sneaks into the room where what's left of Stevens' body is kept. She locks herself in the room while Rutledge and the military try to break in. When the 8 minutes are up, Goodwin shuts down the life support system, and Stevens dies. In the parallel reality where Stevens now exists, another version of Goodwin arrives at work and receives an email from an unknown person. The email is from Captain Coulter Stevens, who explains that their source code technology not only stopped the terrorist, but also created a parallel reality where she now resides. Initially skeptical, she hears news about the failed attack on the train and starts to believe it. Meanwhile, Coulter and Christina are walking around Chicago, happy to be together. Stevens recognizes moments from their walk as scenes he had previously experienced in memories during his time in the capsule, feeling that they are exactly where they are meant to be.